Can you hear me? Yes. I think I have that same sweater. Yeah. Nice. Okay. I put out the post to my Kickstarter that we were just starting, so. Oh, yeah.
And we're live. I guess there's a bit of a crossover with the live mics. Anyway, hello everyone. Welcome in. How are you doing this evening? And thank you for joining us. We're gonna do a sit-down chat with Mark from Dice Monkey Games.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you? How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, I am existing spitefully
Yes.
with a smile on my face.
Same, yeah.
I continue to sally forth, as it were.
Yeah. It's been a long couple hundred years in the last couple weeks.
Right. Yippers. Let's see. Usually when I like to do chats, I don't really do I don't have a list of questions.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Just hanging out, talking about stuff. If you want to do any kind of an intro, let people know.
Yeah, I'm Mark. I've got a blog, Dice Monkey, that has been around for 16 years now, I think. And it was there back in the heyday of blogging when people actually blogged, and we had a huge bloggers network and everything that was really great. And now most of those people have fallen off, and I'm not updating twice a day like I did initially. It was pretty intense back in the day. And so yeah, it's been around for a long time, and since that time I've worked with Margaret Rice Productions. I worked on a couple of the different Marvel Heroic role-playing game books, and I worked as an editor for the Tannhauser line for a few of those supplements for Fantasy Flight, editing the rule books and stuff. And then since then I've run a couple of different Kickstarters. Curse, the City of 1000 Martyrs, which was a systemless setting book, kind of my take on Mordheim. And then I did the Doom of Blackwinter, which is, let's see, it's right there. That was for 4 different game systems. So I wrote the adventure, and then it was in Zweihander, Old School Essentials, 5th edition, and Pathfinder 2nd edition. I will never do that again. that was a lot of work.
That's enough systems.
Yeah, and then because I kept having backers, I kept adding on stretch goals and going, oh, I'll do Pathfinder as well, because I initially was just supposed to do 2. And then I promised I was going to do a setting book for my entire world that both Curse and that adventure take place in. So it was a lot.
I feel that though, getting caught up in the that hoopla of a Kickstarter of just oh, I can add this. Oh, they like that.
Yeah. So with my latest, I set my stretch goals much more reasonably, and now we're just trying to get ourselves funded. So I'm not sure if I'll end up hitting any stretch goals. If we do, that's great. But currently, I'm just trying to get myself funded. But yeah, so I've been around doing stuff for years. I've worked at like 3 different game stores here in town. 2 different game stores before I went and joined the Navy, and then when I came back to town, I worked at another game store. So I've kind of been all over the industry doing stuff. So yeah,
This life of 1,000 things.
yeah.
So the new Kickstarter.
Yeah. So that's Song of the River Prince. I used Lulu to make myself a copy of the game. It is a complete role playing game. It is a sort of cozy river adventure. I describe it as like the Shire meets the Mississippi.
Mm.
Um, I've had it sort of in process being worked on for a few years now. 2019, I was in Korea for about 9 months, and while I was there, Korea is called the Land of Morning Calm, and it's just a very, very like peaceful country. And so, inspired by a lot of that, I started writing this, and then it went on the back burner for a couple of years, and then probably about 8 or 9 months ago, I pulled it back out and got back to work on it, and yeah, it's been work ever since, and I've been doing lots of play testing on it and things like that. It's it's a very, very basic mechanics. It's meant to sort of have the mechanics there and then get out of your way. And it's a lot of fun. The playtesters have all really enjoyed it. You're basically just adventurers traveling up and down the many rivers of the Riverlands, going on adventures, helping out, dock workers who have had, things stolen by the Fae, and trying to figure out who it is who's been sabotaging the latest shipments from one town to the other, things like that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I do love a good cozy RPG.
Yeah.
With some
There's no
with
like
some
end of the
Scooby
world
shenanigans.
stuff. Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
Nothing end of the world like is going on. You're just living life. The idea is that it's this area roughly the size of Washington State that has the Fae sort of intermingle. They're always there, but not always seen. And then the River Prince, everybody talks about the River Prince, but it's more of like a concept of like everything is part of the River Prince's song. Is kind of the idea of it.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how long did you say you've been kind of had this back and forth on the burners?
Since 2019.
2019.
Yeah, so about 6 years.
Oof, and that's a lot of. That's a lot of densely compacted years, too, with shit going on left, right, and center.
Well, and when I was in Korea, I was there without my family. I ended up, I'm in the reserves, and I got deployed over there. And so it was just me on my own, just writing stuff out and coming up with lots of the initial concepts of it. And then, like I said, in the last 9 months, really sitting down and working on it a lot more intensely.
Now, when it comes to writing stuff, are you carry a notebook with you or have a nook at home kind of person?
I'm not really good at like keeping things all in like one place. I have pretty severe ADHD. So I try to, like, if I think of something while I'm out and about, I throw it into my notes app without any kind of organization, and then try to remember that it was in my notes app.
Listen,
and then
that's perfectly acceptable.
Once I sit down at a computer, I try to keep things organized with like the like Google Sheets and things like that to try to keep things in order.
Just info dump this stream of thought.
Exactly, yeah. As long as my brain is able to keep it going, I like push really, really hard to get it all down on paper. And there's been a few places where I've just completely removed large sections because I had one guy look over the book and he was like, "Why do you have like 4 pages on the economy of the Riverlands? Like, frankly, nobody cares about that." I was like, "You're right," but I thought of what the economy was, so I decided to write it down.
I mean, it's good to have in like, I don't know, just like a supplemental DLC kind of a thing
Yeah,
for the economy nerds.
yeah. I was
That
thinking about at some point just putting out a PDF that had all that.
nice.
Yeah,
How long is the Kickstarter running till? Let me
it is
pull
going
up.
till the 15th. So let me actually bring it up right now. It
Linktree.
is. It's
That.
going till the 15th. 12 days to go. We're at 1501 with 59 backers, and we're trying to get to 3,500.
Nice.
So I've still got about 2,000 to go, and I'm hoping that you hit those last couple of days and you get a big push of people.
Mm-hmm.
So fingers crossed we cross.
Fundraisers are a stressful thing
Yeah,
until you kind of figure out like their life cycle.
yeah, yeah,
You know, because like I did the spot fund to come out here, and you just get like that initial burst of like, oh my god, finally I'm gonna win, and then
yeah.
it's just kind of naturally dies off for a while, and you spend
Hmm.
most of the month like, oh no, I'm so close to the finish line.
Yeah,
what
yeah,
what have I done? And then like you just keep putting the work in
yeah.
to put the word out, and you get that last minute people like, oh, I got paid, I can throw 5,
Mhm.
I can throw 10, I can throw
That's why I was
20.
putting it at the 15th, because then I was like, yeah, then that's coming right up on payday for a lot of people. So I was hoping that would catch people.
Yeah.
And then my first Kickstarter for Curse was a goal of 500, and I can't remember. I think I ended up with like 1,500 at the end of that. And then for Black Winter, that was an initial goal of 1,000, and I ended up with like 5,000. So I was like 3,500. That seems pretty reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's most of that is going towards getting an original piece of art for the cover, because Arumek, who's the artist who did this cover, I basically just bought it from him. This piece of art that he already did, so he's going to do an original
Mm-hmm.
cover, and so that's where like a good chunk of that Kickstarter money initially is going to.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those the TTRPG sphere, forever embroiled in the AI art war
Yeah, yeah,
of people, claiming that they can't get their thing made, even
yeah.
though there's artists out there who will work with people who
Hmm.
will cut deals. There are artists that put out specifically free images.
Hmm.
Like if you're a
Yeah,
part of their Patreon, or if you're go to their Ko-fi, some artists will put out like, hey, this is your monthly, your quarterly pack of like, royalty free images. Do with these as you
yeah.
will.
Well, and that's actually on the inside of the book. Let me see if you can see that. I've got the little art up at the top and at the bottom, and
Mm-hmm.
that is I can't remember the artist at the moment, and but it was free on Ko-fi, and so I've put that in there, and then grabbing from gameicons.net, game-icons.net. That's where I've got the fish from,
Mm-hmm.
and then um, David Oakham, who does Oakham Arts paper miniatures, little guys like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm planning on using some of his artwork throughout the book as well,
Mm.
because I think it matches pretty well with RMX stuff. And then I was going to purchase a couple more pieces of artwork from RMX to go inside as well, because basically all of his art is like people living on rivers and oceans and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like almost every single piece has some sort of water involved. So I was like, he's the perfect artist for this. And then Incarnate, who does maps and stuff, I built this map of the Riverlands in
Mm.
Incarnate.
Oh, nice.
So it's been pretty cool to be able to sort of build everything.
Now, I always talk with people when that make games because like I have a hard time myself, um, like reading your standard big company, your standard layout for like TTRPG stuff.
Hmm.
Because I'm very just like must read things in order, and like you throw
Hmm.
tables in the middle of it, and my brain like
Yeah.
doesn't. Do you, like what's the layout process for you?
So like I've got training in InDesign.
Mm-hmm.
With the Navy, I do public affairs, and so we were taught like InDesign back in 2006, like early days of it. But in the end, I found that I actually like Word better. So I just lay it all out in Word, and then I liked my stuff to be really readable too. So the book has all of the rules up at the very front, and then reiterating the rules in boxes, just so that you can very quickly go to them. But
Mm-hmm.
also, I've kept the rules simple enough that you really shouldn't have to like go to the book for the actual mechanics
Mm-hmm.
very often, if at all. Um, I do have these really cool journey rules that I've just finished, like really clarifying, that are really cool. Um, and so that's something you might want to constantly go back to. But then a good chunk of the book is like lore stuff. Every single town is 4 pages, one page covering what it is that is interesting and unique about the town, another page that's different locations in town, another page different NPCs in town, and then um, the downtime activities, because every single town has unique things you can do as you're passing through that town, and downtime has its own little rule set. So yeah, so I tried to keep everything pretty straightforward, and then in near the back of the book, then I have all the different random tables, but I have those all together near the back of the book, where it's a lot easier to flip back to and reference.
Mm.
So there's nothing I hate more than having to like flip back and forth and try to find stuff in
Mm-hmm.
books. I also have an index in there, but like the One Ring role playing game, I'm running that, a campaign of that right now, and that rule book, the second edition rule book, is not friendly if you're trying to find
Like
the rules.
a specific thing.
Yeah, like I went online and was asking other people if they were having the same problem, and they were like, no, you're just supposed to read the entire rule book from front to back and then know the rules. So I found a few people who have like printouts that are like, these are the journey rules on one page, and so I've got those, so then I'll just flip to those myself and only consult the rule book if I really really have to during the session,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not super friendly.
Yeah, I think that's been like when it comes to running games, I think that's been like one of the biggest problems for me, has been like my ADHD brain and the ability to kind of like grasp what I'm reading and what I'm looking at, with
Mm-hmm.
everything being so jumbled and jumped around with like, the Wizards of the Coast stuff. There's just like tables planted everywhere, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to read, and I'm just like, everything gets jumbled in my head, and I did like, what am I even reading about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so like I can't even get like, I try to read a little bit into the rules, and I'm like, it gets frustrating.
Yeah.
So I always love like the independent games that have just very simple rule books, very sparse layouts.
Yeah.
It's something I deeply appreciate.
Like I really like the look of the Morkborg stuff. It's really really cool to look at.
Mm-hmm.
I've not tried to run a game
Mm.
using it, so I don't know how well it would actually be to like have to actually sit down and try to use it,
Mm-hmm.
at the table, because it's very cluttered, and I'm not sure my ADHD would handle that very well.
Let's talk about the blog a little bit.
Yeah. Really quick, somebody was asking about the who it was who did the artwork for the top and bottom
Oh,
stuff,
the header.
and I'm trying to look them up right now because they're on their name? I'm not sure, so I'll keep looking, but I will make sure that we end up mentioning their name because is it Ramona? Yes. So it is Ramona over on Ko-Fi. Alderdoodle.co.uk
Oh,
is
I
the
know that account, I think.
yes. And so they have got a bunch of free art over on their um, Ko-Fi. My plan is basically, if my Kickstarter funds, I'm going to end up because I use a ton of her stuff in here, so I'll
Mm.
probably end up like throwing some money onto her Ko-Fi to be like, thank you. So yes,
Drop their link in the chat too. So how long have you been doing the blog?
16 years.
Damn.
Yeah, it was like just after my son was born. So I had seen a bunch of people. I'm sure it was probably like I was probably on EN World or something, and people linking to their blogs, and saw that there was this RPG bloggers network, and went and looked at the network and saw um, what people were making, and I was like, oh, I could do this, and decided to create it. And it was right around the time that fourth edition was really blowing up. It would just come out, and so I started making stuff for that. Ended up naming it Dice Monkey after I think it was Gnome Stew. That blog, they had a list of different gaming terms on their site, and one of them was Dice Monkey, which is somebody who manages to succeed purely because of lucky dice rolls.
Mm.
Like they have no actual strategy. It's just pure luck of the dice that they managed to do well. And I was like, that actually works really well. And so it started, I think I went about a year just as dicemonkey.wordpress.com before I was like, okay, I've been at this for a while, and ended up actually buying the domain.
Mm.
And then over the years, I've had a few other writers here and there come and go. Basically just friends who were like, hey, can I write something for this? And having that blog ended up helping a lot. For a little while there, Wizards of the Coast was sending me stuff, most of the 5th edition stuff before the 2024 stuff. They were sending me copies of the books to review, which was kind of cool. And then I've occasionally had other creators reach out to me and ask me to review stuff. And you know, the problem is the blog isn't really focused. It's kind of chaotic. It's sometimes I'm writing reviews, sometimes I'm writing random advice. Sometimes I end up spending a couple months talking about wargaming because that's the thing that's interesting me at the moment.
Mm.
I feel like at this point I've kind of gotten to the point of I've reached the end of the advice that I can give for role playing. So occasionally I'll write, you know, some random rules for different game systems. Like I think a couple months ago I wrote there was like 3 pages of one Star Wars comic where the Jedi Master Jocasta Nu created a gun with a lightsaber, and so I decided to stat it up for Star Wars D6, D20, and the FFG system.
Mm.
So things like that, like it's just kind of random stuff goes up, and I'm sure I'd probably get more viewers if I actually had any kind of focus on the blog.
Mm.
Kind of the same with my TikTok. My TikTok will switch between talking about war games, talking about role-playing games, talking about CCGs, stuff like that.
It's hard to get eyes on stuff
Mm.
consistently.
Yeah.
Do you have a post schedule, or do you just kind of like I feel like doing a write up
I've
on this?
I've tried to keep to a post schedule for a while there. I think last summer I had been pretty consistent that I had Fridays were a review, and then Mondays were a post about anything.
Mm.
And then if I had any announcements along the way, the problem is there's not a really good central repository for getting RPG news. So trying to like post that type of stuff to my feed has been kind of spotty.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but and then over on my Facebook page for it for a while, I was trying to post stuff every single day to get more followers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, and I had scheduled out, so it was like there was RPG advice on Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then memes on Tuesday and Thursday, and you can schedule stuff out for like a month. And so I was like, basically being consistent, will this get more views on the Facebook page that'll then bring more views onto the blog? And it really didn't. Like I tried it for probably about like 3 months and got nothing, like maybe 1 or 2 new followers, but it's tricky to figure out how to get
it seems like no matter what, like, your niche is, a lot of the sites, it just like it's like drama driven.
Yeah,
like that's like it's almost the point where I'm just like, should I just start RPing some drama that isn't actually happening and try and get people like, should we do TTRPG soap operas?
Yeah,
Beef between characters, like
honestly,
like
I've
get a couple of creators that have some, semi-established OCs and have their OCs fucking start beef with each other online.
Yeah, I've honestly considered it, and like, to tell the truth, like the most views I've ever gotten over on Twitter were when I ended up like speaking out against Satine Phoenix and stuff like that. Like, so it's like, okay, I mean that does well, but also the only reason I was doing it was because I like was genuinely passionate about it because of how many of like my friends were hurt by her, and then Zach Sabbath on top of that. So like,
that's the one that immediately came to mind too, was that Mike, the Mike Merle stuff.
Yeah, and like I was like ringing the bell about Satine Phoenix like years before things finally hit. I was so happy when everybody finally came out against her, because for a long time I had been like, guys, like, she was Zach Sabbath's minion for years. The only reason why she got away with it was because Google Plus died. Like, all the evidence of her like attacking people on his behalf disappeared when that died, and I ended up with some people in the industry actually blocking me because I was calling out Magpie for hosting a live stream with her for their Avatar game. And I was like, okay, I mean, I would probably be more successful like in the industry if I kept my mouth shut.
That I understand.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm also really, really bad at keeping my mouth shut. I think it's part of how I was, because I was raised homeschooled, and so you're taught to be very loud and confident in what you say. And that doesn't rub off even if your like political opinions end up changing over the years. So
it's it's a lot of that's the same with me. Is just like, the thought of somebody being like that and using people like that in a community that like I'm in the middle of, to people that I know and stuff like that, and just like, that silence is compliance thing, like I just can't.
Yeah.
Woohoo! 59 backers.
Yeah.
Nice. So do you have, I know you post a lot, or you talk a lot about Star Wars systems. Are you an any genre, anytime?
Yeah, I tend to gravitate more towards sci-fi. Like, I do like a good fantasy. I've run long, consistent campaigns of both 4th edition and 5th edition, so I've talked a lot about that type of stuff. But like Star Wars D6 was my first role playing game that I ever played, and then Star Wars D20 was the first role playing game I ever ran.
Mm-hmm.
And so like Star Wars is like really strongly baked into my DNA as far as running role playing games. Like people complain about Star Wars consistently, and but everything single Star Wars thing that exists I love, because in my head it's just more content.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh sweet, Rings of Kafrine, that's a new thing, I'm going to use that in my next game. And I had actually had an idea recently for a big giant sprawling Star Wars campaign that would basically continue to exist even as game groups came and went, but I would basically run this perpetual campaign on board a much bigger rebel ship.
Mm.
I told my friend about it, and he's much more of a Star Trek fan than a Star Wars fan, and he was like, do you want to run this kind of idea as a Star Trek campaign? And I was like, all right. So now we're going to be running a once a month Star Trek campaign, starting at the end of April. So
I mean, I'm as a consummate fan of Star Wars and Star Trek. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I could just be like, oh, you should have. Like, I'm like,
yeah.
But also Stargate.
My wife is huge into Stargate.
Mm.
I've like watched some stuff here and there, but she's like really, really.
Yeah, that's. I love Star Trek. I grew up on Star Trek.
Yeah.
I love Star Wars. Oh, but God, am I a gatehead?
Yeah.
I think I just finished my 24th watch through of the franchise.
Wow. Yeah.
And it always ends with me getting just horrifically angry at the abrupt end of Stargate Universe that I will never let go of ever.
Yeah.
I one of these days I'd like to, if I'm gonna run a game, it's probably gonna be that Stargate that was kickstarted a few years ago. I think more than likely it's gonna be that, because that's the universe that like I don't need to read the lore in the book.
That's how I am with Star Wars. It's like I don't like I can run like at this point I could probably run Star Wars D6 or D20 without ever picking up a single book as far as like the rules go or the lore goes. Like I can just run it without needing anything else. But like I grew up with Star Trek as well, and then right around like 14 or so I decided that Star Trek was for nerds, Star Wars was for cool kids, and so I cared about Star Wars. And then it's only in the last like 10 years or so that I've like come back to back into Star Trek and actually like really gotten back into it and everything. So in the last couple of years I went through and like rewatched everything. So now I've got all that Star Trek rumbling around in my head now. And one thing with this campaign that we got going on is I specifically was like, if you guys want to do this, like you guys are, because we're only meeting once a month outside of the game, you guys are going to need to like do research on actual like science stuff.
Nice.
So that when we come to the game and they mention like some type like the Methuselah star, you're going to know what the Methuselah star is and everything you need to know about it, so your character knows about it. So, and everybody who is going to be playing, they're like, that sounds really, really cool. I can totally do that. So that's going to be exciting.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love, like, I don't think I've ever been in any long running campaigns. Mostly I just get to do one shots here and there.
Yeah.
But God, I love that. I think that's why I like the idea of a Stargate game for me, because that universe is so deep. And it's great for just like, you could do long running story arcs, but it's also very like Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
You know, with a lot of the episodes are like, you know, you don't even have to touch on the main plot. Just like, we're going to go this place and like, oh, some stuff happened. We'll have it resolved by the end of the session.
Yeah, and that's kind of what with the Star Trek campaign, I was like, okay, we're going to do it episodically, because if we're only meeting once a month, we can't try to remember like the cliffhanger that happened a month ago. With my One Ring campaign, we're playing through Moria, and that's supposed to be every other week, but then we keep getting delayed, and we probably run about 10 sessions in about 6 months. So um, when things keep getting like thrown off, it ends up um, making it so that we kind of have to relearn the rules
Hmm.
each session. So we like do a quick little refresh, like, hey, remember this is how everything works, and then we get back into it. And I usually do a recap. I've built a little website for everybody, so we can look over and see what had happened before. I write it out in like very like Tolkien-ish, Silmarillion-ish language, what happened in the previous session. So
Nice.
yeah.
Let's see, what was it? What was the last games I played? I had a Seventh Sea game that kind of fell apart. That
Mhm.
was fun.
Yeah.
I'd like to hit that one again.
Yeah.
And then a Sundered Isles.
Is Sundered Isle, is that Pathfinder?
Unsure.
Because Seventh Sea is Savage Worlds, right?
I think so.
It looks like Sundered Isles is Ironsworn.
That's right. Yes.
Nice. Yeah, I'll have to check those out. I haven't looked too much into that one.
I have a huge affinity for like sci-fi and pirates. I think that's the one full campaign I got to play in was over on Dead Aussie Gamer. We did Spelljammer.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And that was very much my jam. I enjoyed that greatly.
Yeah.
So the Kickstarters moving along. 61 backers.
Yeah, I just saw it's
Nice.
we've got another 68 dollars since we started talking, so that's good.
When doing the blog over the years, has there been like a specific like system, like indie system that you just absolutely loved to write about? Like it was one of your favorite bits that you wrote about that kind of sticks out to you a little bit?
I'm trying to think, because it's been now so long. I know like for a while there I really got stuck on Fiasco. I've actually written quite a few Fiasco supplements, and so talking about that quite a bit and using like Fiasco for other games, like for setting up like session 0 for other games. I did that with Burning Wheel. I first ran a short little game of Fiasco to set things up, and then for a long time there I was really into Savage Worlds, because back in 2007 I think, I ended up going with a friend. I was living in Virginia and we drove down to North Carolina for Con Carolinas, and we played a session of Savage Worlds that was using their Necessary Evil setting, where you play as supervillains. And it was sort of the person had set it up as a sort of Suicide Squad during World War II. We were American supervillains who had been captured, and our job was to go kill Nazis.
Oh, nice.
And at the end of the session, I had basically like brought all the supervillains under my wing and had become like the leader of them, and all the other players around the table were like, this is incredible, can we keep playing? And so I was pretty hooked on Savage Worlds for quite a while and wrote a lot of stuff for that. Probably about 3 or 4 years ago, the site ended up getting hacked and I lost everything because the hackers were gonna try to charge me like $1,200 to get everything back, and I wasn't willing to do that. And so my dad helped me get rid of the website, and then I went through archive.org and found all the articles that I could, because there's a lot I know that are missing, and like republished them back to the blog and like backdated them So I have them in the actual dates that they appeared. I just know I don't have everything in there that was there back in the day.
That's wild to think that somebody would target something just so niche as that.
Yeah. And I hadn't backed up the website like ever. And so my dad was like, yeah, you should have backed that up, because he's a computer programmer. So he's like really big on that stuff.
Mm. Do when you do game writing, do you have any like go-to resources that you use? As far as like websites or like anything in specific, like do you have a toolkit per
Not
se?
really. It really depends on the game. So like when I was working on um, Marvel Heroic, with that one, I ended up um, going to there's a Marvel wiki, and use that really really extensively, because with that one we had to, every character you make, because I was working on building pre-made characters who were actually in the Marvel universe.
Mm-hmm.
um, every single character was like that specific time. So like I was working on the Civil War stuff, so it was like you have to do the stuff that was during the Marvel Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't ever reference stuff that happens after. And um, you need to be paying attention to like if stuff was like soft retconned in the years intervening, if you're trying to like grab information from previous eras and stuff. um, and so that was tricky. And then going and using like the Marvel Unlimited to actually read comic issues and stuff for specific info on the characters.
I was gonna say
um,
Civil War like MCU or Civil War like comic book
the comic book Civil War,
comic book
yeah.
Civil War.
Yeah. Because this was before the movies.
Mm.
um, and and then for Song of the River Prince, that one has kind of been doing doing my own thing with it. I had an idea for a very base mechanic that I thought, oh yeah, this would be fun to roll, and then realizing, like, trying to figure out what rules to add in. There's a little bit of fate in there. There's I saw somebody online, they said that, so my mechanics very simply are: you roll a d20, you roll a die associated with whatever skill you've got. So if you've got like a d6 in swimming and you're trying to swim, you roll d20, a d6, and then because your physical is a +1 for this character, you have a +1 to it, and then you just roll it, add it up, and you're trying to hit a number. Very simple. So very much like if the d20 system, if instead of having a +5 to a skill, instead you had a die roll to the skill instead.
Mm.
It's pretty simple. And so that was basically, it was like, well, if I do that, then that's the base mechanic. Then I don't have to think too much beyond that. That can really encompass pretty much any type of role you're going to be making in the game. So yeah, so with that, I just kind of went with it. With Doom of Blackwinter, I'm looking at this in reverse, so it's
Mm.
with Doom of Blackwinter. That one initially actually started with a couple of the other bloggers on the RPG Blog Network. We met up at Gen Con 2010, I think, and we were like hanging out this underground bar and started talking about, what if we did 4th edition once a week, a new encounter for this overall story. And so then if people are getting together like once, because really you could really only with 4th edition play one encounter a week, because fights took so long.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, well, if people get together once a week, or even if they get together every other week, then they've got a couple of encounters at a time, and in the end we'll have an entire adventure for them after a few months. And so we started working on that. We got probably about like 4 encounters in, and just weren't getting the views. And mind you, we were having like I think by the end we were like, yeah, it sucks. We're only getting like 150 downloads for week 4. And like now, like I would kill to have 150 downloads.
Mm.
But back then, like our blog numbers were so high; they were in like the thousands a day. It was insane.
It's
And
it's
so
it's wild how quick platforms
yeah,
shift, how quickly people just migrate.
yeah. So we ended up dropping it, and then it's just sort of been there in the background in my head. And I reached out to both of them and was like, "Do you mind if I go with this?" And they were like, "Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's all yours. Like, do whatever you want with it." And so I had it kicking around in my head, like I should do something with Black Winter at some point. And then finally, when Zine Quest was coming around, I was like, "Oh, I can make this as a zine." And then it expanded into a massive full adventure beyond that. So it's and with that, I used when I was working on the Pathfinder stuff, there's a website called like something of Nethys that basically has all the Pathfinder rules on it, and so I used that pretty extensively for those rules. And we had sort of hammered out what the general idea was going to be for the full adventure, and so I knew like the 3 different acts, what in general was going to happen. So it opens with like climbing up a mountainside, dealing with all kinds of winter-based encounters, and then inside, once you get into the mountain, then I basically have frozen Moria essentially, and then you move in. There's a portal inside the frozen dwarven city, to the Feywild, and then you have like a frozen Feywild adventure. So it's all very like cold adventure, and so I ended up having to come up with. I think Pathfinder had good enough cold rules that I didn't need to build something from scratch, but for a couple of the different systems, I ended up making expanded cold rules for dealing with the cold for those, and that was just sort of off the top of my head trying to figure out how I would want to see it played at the table, because a lot of like I did see somebody review Doom of Blackwinter, and they were saying that it was kind of sparse and kind of railroady, and I was like, you know what, fair, like I'll take that, because it is pretty railroady, but also it's that I kind of left out all the stuff that I would do at my own table. Like I'm like, yeah, of course, like it's missing these things, because as game master I would fill that in myself just based on character actions, but I probably should have been a little bit more like specific in the book. But at this point I finally got it sent out to all the backers as of like a few days ago, because I was still trying to get the physical copies made, because Drive-Thru RPG is a nightmare to get stuff printed through, because every single time you make a tweak they have to send it to you and you have to look over it and review it, and you also have to submit the PDF in a very specific format, and if you don't, then your images that have transparent backgrounds just appear as solid black boxes.
Oh no.
Complete nightmare. So I finally got and this was probably like a month or so ago, I finally got everything done for it, and I was just waiting for Drive-Thru RPG to send me the final copies for me to approve, for me to send out to everybody, and I finally got to do that. So that's finally off of my plate entirely, and it's a huge weight off my shoulders.
I think that's one thing that's always kind of just like stuck in the like in the back of my head when it comes to like Kickstarters and stuff, is just like that, oh god, what if I can't, like I've never done a Kickstarter for anything that I've kind of crowdfund done. I do like little mini versions like through Ko-fi and whatnot.
Yeah, I like that you can do that with Ko-fi.
But like the idea of just being like, you know, like, yeah, I'm gonna do a run of this, like I'm afraid of success is the point of this story, of just like, I'm afraid of like, well, I can do like a run of like 100 of them, you know, and I can kick that out pretty simply. It'll be a bit of a struggle because I'm one guy trying to get things done, and I'm afraid of waking up one day and being like 70,000.
Yeah. Yeah. Like with Curse, that ended up being like a couple of years late, but there was like some like pretty big like family crisis that happened right in the middle of it that threw things off and like sent me like not writing anything for a while. And that was mostly Curse. I wrote entirely. I started the Kickstarter with simply the opening paragraph of, oh, this is a cool concept, and that was all I had.
Mm.
And so then I had to sit down and actually write it. And then with Doom of Black Winter, that one was like the first couple of encounters were written and I knew where it was going, and then that ended up being like a year and a half late, but it wasn't written. So I've learned from my mistakes, and like with this latest one, like this book is fully written, it just needs art put into it.
Mm-hmm.
um and then since then, like while the Kickstarter has been going on, I've been getting more ideas of things to add into it, and then looking and realizing that I've written like another 40 pages for this book, and I'm like, I don't think I should fit another 40 pages into this book. Like I don't want it to be like, a book this thick. So I've got a pretty extensive section of info about like the Fae who live in the land, who are, neither good nor evil. They just are, and don't you dare cross them.
Mm.
And so I'm thinking for that, like I may actually make that as like a separate book. I had as like a really high stretch goal that I would have a book all about the Fae. Like we're not going to end up hitting that goal, so now it's just thinking like, okay, what do I want to include so there's enough of that stuff in the actual book, like the main book, to really give you a good feel of what the Fae are like, and then how much of that stuff can I then put in a separate book at a later point. Because at this point I'm like, well, that stuff's written too, so I've written way more content than is actually going to be in the main book. But if I put it all in, we'd be looking at like a 300-page book for a rule system that's very, very Spartan. Like it's designed to be Spartan, but it's like I'm essentially writing then a giant lore book that's like, oh yeah, here's some rules too.
Have you ever thought about it's something like this when funded, and then with all, like you said, all of the extra stuff you get, like at some point having just like a Song of the River Prince like line,
Mm-hmm.
and just like tabling a con or something like that?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I've written like quite a few short stories set in Curse, which was my first Kickstarter, and I've actually went onto Lulu and printed them out and stuff. So I'm like, maybe I could do that type of thing as well, like write some short stories set in the Riverlands. I've got like, I'd like to do a book all about the festivals that take place in each of the towns. Each town has like one central festival, and then there's like 5 different festivals that are celebrated across the Riverlands. So if I could put out a book that was just more detail on all that, a book of adventures would be great as well. I was actually thinking of doing basically a book of adventures about each of the different festivals. Have it each adventure set during one of those festivals, and then depending on where you are in the land, you can pull one of those out. So yeah, I've probably got like 4 or 5 different books that I could probably do in the Riverlands, but then like I'm not sure I could get up to like 20 or 30 books. Like when you see people who have like these massive lines of
Mm-hmm.
stuff, just because it is an area the size of Washington State and there's only so much content. Like I can't keep writing new towns because at some point there's no more wilderness.
Yeah. Um, do you have like? I want to ask if you have like a favorite system to write for, but like, do you have a system that's like your default when you're like, oh, I should write? I'd like to make. God damn it! I got to stop making games in this. I got to start. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, the D6 system for Star Wars I feel is one of the easiest to do. I've written tons and tons of I don't know if you've played Star Wars D6 at all, but you've got
I have not.
okay. So you've got you can make your character from scratch, or you can use a template, which the template is like Smuggler, and it's basically Han Solo, and
Mm-hmm.
it's got everything filled in except you get to spend like 12 points among the skills, and it's meant for you to very quickly like knock out a character and start playing. And I went and have basically copied every single template, not every single, most of the templates that are out there that have come out in all the different books over the years. Um, and I made a cool like layout for it and everything. And then I started coming up with my own. And at this point, I've got probably like 30 different templates that I've come up with of my own. And it's really quick. You just go, oh yeah, what if you had a character who was like this? And then like I can make stuff for it pretty easily. And because there's no like levels or any, that's the thing, is like if you have levels in a game, then you need to make sure your stuff is like really, really balanced.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you don't, then like how powerful things are can be more vibey. And so it's super easy in Star Wars D6 to make something and you go, I don't really care if this thing's way too powerful. Like it's your job as the game master to make sure you don't give it to the players if it's a player thing. Like it is what it is.
They don't accidentally
Um,
somehow find the ultimate nullifier.
yeah, exactly. And then I actually, for Marvel Heroic, I created a blog before Marvel Heroic actually came out, called Marvel Plot Points, and it was because I was like, "There's people are gonna want more characters for this," because I had gotten a copy, I think, like a month early, a PDF to review for the blog, and I was like, "Oh, I should make a website that allows me to make more characters," and ended up with like a whole roster of writers for it, and that blog still exists, and we still basically will have these little spurts where the blog will be dead for a year and then somebody will be like, oh, we should do something with this. So like we did all the characters from X-Men 97
Mm.
last summer, when just after it came out, and so we got all the X-Men 97 characters out there and stuff. And that one's a lot of fun to make stuff for, because you can always there's always more characters to make, and characters will have these little groups of powers called power sets, and like on the fly, like you'll be like, oh, I liked that this character had this type of weapon. You're like, oh, I'll just make that power set. I don't even have to make the character, and then you can slap that power set over the top of a character, and that's how you end up with like Wolverine wearing Iron Man armor in the game and stuff like that.
Mm.
So that's probably, yeah, so probably Star Wars D6 and Marvel Heroic are the two that are like my go-to makers, like, or things that I make stuff for.
Like when you get an idea, um, for like writing a new game, is it like you go vibe and setting first? Do you have like a specific character and you're like, I would like to, or just like, is there a small thing that builds into a larger universe for you, or is there just like an overall vibe?
It's usually a vibe. Like Song of the River Prince was a vibe. It was started with the name, and then from there it was like, okay, well, what would Song of the River Prince be about? And actually, like the very first opening section of Song of the River Prince that I have in the Kickstarter, like, and the video is all centered around that I came up with back in 2019, and it is almost completely unchanged, because I just started writing and then was like, oh, this is a setting. And then with it being a setting, then I was like, okay, well, it should probably have rules, because I don't necessarily want to make it like, I don't want to have to reference some other book, so I'll make it its own rule system. So it's usually starting with vibes and a general overall idea. Curse was another one. With Curse, it was like, I said I want to make basic. My initial idea actually was because Zweihander is based off of Warhammer Fantasy, and Warhammer Fantasy doesn't have an official Mordheim supplement for the Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game. I was like, well, I could come up with like basically a knockoff version of Mordheim that could be used for Zweihander. And then as I was writing it, I was like, oh, I actually don't need to write any rules for it. I can make it more system agnostic. And so that really just came from me going, what if Mordheim but not Mordheim? Um, and so it's very much like inspired by that, but then as the writing went along, it spun off into its own thing. And regularly throughout, I reference this world called Terranern that was a world that I created back when I was like 13, and it's just steadily evolved over the years, and I've run fantasy campaigns in it and stuff like that. And it's a kind of generic fantasy world. There's a few unique things to it, but nothing major. It's mine. Is I guess the unique thing about it. So then I was like, oh, Curse could be set in Terranern, and then I just put in a bunch of stuff about the gods and things like that. And then when I was writing Doom of Blackwinter, I was like, oh, I can set it in the same world as Curse. I can make references to that, and I can also set it in Terranern. And so, but then because I did the Kickstarter, then it was like, oh, well, I can, as one of the stretch goals, have a campaign setting for Terranern, and then it would force me to sit down and actually write the lore for the world, where that's just been sitting in my head. Like, nobody else knows what Keldara and Min are. I've not written them down anywhere, and now I actually, because I did the Kickstarter, I'm forced to do so. And then that allowed me to actually create the setting in actual, like, get it all out of my head.
When it comes to world building, do you have any like have you had any moments where you're like, you get so deep into it and you're just like, shit, well, I shouldn't have done that?
Yeah.
Like paradoxes, you accidentally write yourself into a corner.
Yeah, I ended up having to walk myself out of a world-ending apocalypse in Terranern, because I was like, no, there can't be an apocalypse yet. Because like I'm writing adventures for this, like so I had to like pull the brakes and like actually undo a bunch of the writing. It ended up that Terranern had like there's like one evil god, and he ended up awakening and blotting out the sun, and now the world has been sitting in darkness for 20 years. I'm like, no, that can't happen, because like in Doom of Blackwinter, the sun still exists. So and I had come up with a whole like ecology of like why all the plants weren't dying and stuff like that, and it was like, no, step back. So and then the setting also has like, it's called the Graveyard of Kingdoms, because there's been just like empire after empire after empire that's risen and fallen, and so I had to write up all these different empires, and each time had to make them powerful enough that when players find their ruins, they're very impressed by it, but not so powerful that like, why aren't they still around?
Do you have any kind of like system and setting and genre agnostic like bucket o ideas? Like you get a nugget in your head and you're like, oh, this is cool. I don't know where I'd put that, but it's cool. So I'm just gonna put it in here, and if I ever need something, we'll rummage around in the bucket.
Yeah, I've got on my Google Drive just so many files and so many folders, and what I do is I throw the idea out, and then I make sure to label it something that if I'm trying to remember later, like, what was it? I had a sci-fi setting where everything was, but they didn't realize it was sci-fi. It was actually fantasy, and they didn't know that they had all landed on world ships like 10 millennia ago, and all magic is actually nanobots. And I was like, oh, okay, nanobot fantasy. So then it's easy for me to find when I, know, years later, if I decide to finally come back to that.
As someone who is notoriously bad at labeling files,
Yeah. I fought really, really hard to make sure that I do so, and I still have so many files in Google Drive that are just untitled. And so what I'll do is I'll occasionally just go in and look at it and go, is this anything? Oh no, this is absolutely nothing. Then I'll delete it. And if
Mm-hmm.
it's something, then I'll label it. But I've actually got right here in my filing cabinet, this is pages upon pages of board games and card games that I came up with and I wrote by hand when I was on a trip for like 2 weeks a few years ago. And it's just been sitting in a folder. And at some point, I should probably get that stuff hand copied into like an actual like typed up form and stuff. But I'm like, I haven't looked in those in so long that I don't know if any of the games are even feasible. But that folder is there, and I know that it's there, so that if at any point I finally like, you know what, I want to write up a board game, then I can at least look through those and figure out if anything's viable.
How many board games have you written up?
I mean, there's probably about 30 different board games in here.
No, I mean, like, have you like made a board game?
Like 3 that I've actually written up. So there was I have a friend who lives down in Colorado. He was a blogger for a while. I think he went by like the online DM, something like that. And his name is Michael. And I would go down to Colorado for a couple weeks each summer, and he was a big on game design. He's designed a ton of different games. He's published them. He's done Kickstarters. And he was always like, I'll always play test anything that you're going to be writing. And so I had actually come up with like Cards Against Humanity, but with haikus. And so it wasn't funny. It was instead just like you had stacks of cards that were 7 syllables, stacks of cards that were 5, and then you were building haikus with them. And like the person who was the judge would decide like which of the 5 syllables would be placed with the 7s and stuff like that. And they were all very sort of ethereal, very like the leaves are falling, that type of thing. And I was very proud of it. I wrote up like a big old stack of cards. I've still got it over there somewhere. And we sat down and played. And after a few rounds, he said, "Do we have to keep playing?" And I was like, "I know, you're right." Because it was pretty, but it wasn't fun. Like the fun of a game like that is that everybody's laughing and arguing why theirs should be chosen. And like nobody was arguing about it because they were like, "Oh yeah, that's nice."
That's
like,
a game specifically for like poetry nerds to get together and fight
like,
with each other.
I was tempted to put it out as a Kickstarter of being like, not say to everybody like, listen, this game isn't fun, but it's pretty. But like the people who care about haikus, I'm sure they'll love it.
Right?
So yeah. So and then there's been a couple others that I've worked on over the years. I've got this idea for a game that you can actually play like as you're waiting in line at cons. Or like you run into somebody and it involves like having buttons that have like your class and race and your basically it's like an on the fly versus role playing game. But the problem is that figuring out how to make it so that you have some way that you can compare strengths and there's a bit of randomness to it. So that's been sort of knocking around for a long time that I don't know if that'll ever come to be. But I've made quite a few prototypes of it and tested it out. And it's been fun when I've tested it out, but I think at this point I need to probably just buy a big like button maker and start making buttons and trying it out with people. And something like that I would probably like basically get the local community. There's like 6 different game shops in town. Get players at like Magic the Gathering nights trying it out and playing it, and get to the point where they're actually carrying the buttons on their bags and wanting to play against each other like on the fly, before I ever got to the point at which I was trying to like get it out on a much larger scale, like Kickstarter or something like that. But it's like, again, that's one I've had kicking around for a long time, that I'm like, at some point I should do something with it, but it's going to require like all of my brain power only focused on that, and I've got too many other things that I'm like messing around with at the moment to make that my sole focus.
Uh, The design aspect of stuff like that, and just coming up, like, what was it? Oh God, maybe like 8 years ago. Um, like like for some reason, like I was bored and
Mm-hmm.
spent a lot of time alone, and I had a bucket of army men,
Mm-hmm.
and I had what was it? Directional dice.
Mm.
And just like on a whim, I just wrote up these quick, fast, and dirty rules for just like I took a squad of 4 or 5 army men and like statted up their weapons a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the army men I just like disfigured into zombies,
Oh yeah.
and I quartered a playmat that I made,
Mm-hmm.
and then just used the random directional dice and like a D4 and
Mm-hmm.
another dice, and like just made it so it's like you had to survive 12 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Your weapons could do this, and each round, you add this many incoming zombie dice to the dice pool,
Mm. Yeah.
and
So
like
you
and
slowly
it
become stronger and
rans in,
stronger.
and this many land in this quadrant, this many land in this quadrant, and the only rules are zombies move towards the center.
Yeah.
And like I just became obsessed for like 3 days of doing this weird thing that just popped into my head one day. I think it was because I was watching a lot of Will Wheaton's Tabletop,
Yeah.
like a lot of it, and I was just
Yeah.
like, one day I was just like, God, I want to make a board game. I don't have a lot of friends. I'm gonna make a solo board game.
Yeah. And now solo board games are huge.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like a whole genre now.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't back then.
Oh,
It's
I,
awesome.
I
Yeah.
I do love like the rise of like the journaling games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those have been really interesting to see come into their own as like a genre of just like
Yeah.
cozy journaling games. You can just sit and have a cup of tea.
1,000-Year-Old Vampire I had to stop playing because I was at the point where I was gonna have to end up finally like biting my true love and killing her. And I was like, I can't go on. No, I can't keep writing this. I gotta stop. She has to live.
And make the hard choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I've Colossal is another really good one. That one is it's a solo journaling game that takes place in a you got all these like fantasy lands, but it is all set inside a massive castle. Like off in the distance, like you can see massive walls at the edge of like where everything is, and like way overhead, like you've got the blue of the atmosphere, but you can kind of see a rooftop overhead because everything is so massive. But it's not like you're a very tiny person living in a giant's house. Like there's forests and everything like that are all your size. It's just you are in an enormous, like nobody knows what lives outside of the castle. That's a really cool little journaling game that I really like.
Nice. Are there any like bucket list systems or settings that you're like, oh, someday this is who I would like to?
I mean, I would love to write for something official Star Wars, just because it was my very first, and so being able to actually write for that would be really cool. I'd also love to write for Star Trek Adventures, which is funny because um, basically based on my idea with Marvel plot points, where before the game came out, I started making a blog for it. I did the same with Star Trek Adventures, on a website called Continuing Mission, and then I wasn't immediately like jumping in and playing anything, and also I didn't know Star Trek as well then as I do now, and so I didn't really have much to write for it. But a bunch of writers came on board and were like, "Yeah, let's all start making stuff." And then because I wasn't really doing anything, I just handed it off to the other writers. I was like, you know what? You guys are in charge of it now. And now, like 2 or 3 of the people who were writers for it are all officially writing for Star Trek Adventures, and I was like, if I had just stuck with it, if I
Oh
had just
no.
stuck around. So I've because I'm actually starting a campaign again, I've actually started writing for them again. But I'm like, I started this thing, and yeah, so I'd like to write for something like that. I'd love to write for Marvel again, but the Marvel multiverse system, that's the current system that's out, I think is fine, but I don't like it as much as Marvel Heroic. So I don't know that I'd necessarily want to do that. I'd love to like actually sit down and work with somebody, like to make a game like as a like a game company does, like with multiple people all working together,
Mm-hmm.
to actually create a system and everything like that. Because I'm not usually like an expert on the rules. I'm more the I'm more the vibes guy. So I sort of try to come up with like the general feeling for the rules. And so getting to work with somebody, like my dream is to be sitting in a conference room with a big giant whiteboard and like 3 or 4 other people, and all of us just getting up and writing on the whiteboard and spending like 2 weeks like hammering stuff out and figuring out exactly how to make like this perfect system that we all really want. um so at some point I'd love to do something like that. There was a while there, right when blogging was really big, where I had basically gathered a bunch of the different bloggers together, and we were starting to work on a gaming magazine, that we were going to put out like I think quarterly was the plan. And with that, we basically had a giant Google Doc where we would write and then set what we were writing to our color, and so it was basically like a giant chat log. And I've still got it in my Google Drive. And we had come up with like the first issue and everything, and then people just kind of like weren't writing and went off on their own separate ways. But that was a lot of fun to collaborate with a whole. I think there was like 6 or 7 of us. So getting to do something like that would be pretty cool.
I do
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that like it drew me to the gaming space was the collaborative creativity,
Mm-hmm.
and just like, you being the vibes guy, being able to, just sit and collab with somebody who's absolutely the number cruncher nerd,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, and I'll never be that guy.
Yeah, no, other that's like I've had that experience like years of doing music. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
read music. I don't that's akin far beyond me. But like
Mm-hmm.
I had a buddy Chad who spoke the math of music. Like he would just
Yeah.
say magic fucking words
Yeah.
about what he was doing, and I was like, okay.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
I I'm just gonna go doodly do a bunch because it's really cool.
Yeah.
But like getting to work with people like that, like I think that's, I don't know, it's like one of my favorite things.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know.
I've got a friend like locally who, he's been working on some games, and I basically bounce stuff off of him. And that's been really cool, and we've been talking for a while about actually like sitting down and not not starting a game company, but starting a game company, doing
Mm-hmm.
that sort of bouncing off of one another. But we're like, we do need a few more people, and like locally, so that we can all sit down together
Mm-hmm.
and actually figure things out. But um, again, like the issue is that I've got so much stuff like that I want to work on that's not. I have to actually focus, and that's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Is there any, I don't know, is there any current franchise that's going that you're like, you know what, that would make a fucking great game? Like I want to play
Ooh,
in
that's a
that
good question.
universe.
I mean, watching Severance, I'm like, what would I wonder what that would look like as a game, but also like I don't know that I would want to try to turn Severance into a game because it's so like, its own thing. I'm trying to think of like the different like stuff that I've seen lately. I'm basically, one thing with me is that I'm always looking at stuff as content of what could I use this for in a role playing game. So I think it'd be really cool to see like a role playing game that was essentially like The Pit, which is that HBO show that's like super realistic um, emergency room hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how would that work as a role playing game? I would be fascinated to see. Like they've Magpie Games has a game called The Ward, I think, that is, it's much more like, it's powered by the apocalypse, and it's much more like a medical drama. So, but it's not so much focused on like the medical stuff. So like, I really like the idea of a role playing game that's basically built entirely of mini games, and getting to like have a role playing game where you're like, okay, we're gonna do brain surgery today, and you've got like some sort of like cardboard like thing of the brain, and you've got like tokens or something like that that you're supposed to fiddle with. Would be cool. That's actually something for a long time that I've thought I would love to do, is a role-playing game entirely made of mini games. Every single thing you do is an entirely different rule set, but they're all kind of board gamey, so you don't, it's not like you have to like really extensively learn like this massive rule set for each and every different thing you do. But like, I've considered like with Song of the River Prince having a supplement of mini games of like, here's a fishing mini game that actually requires you to like utilize like tokens and stuff like that, and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm not sure. I'd be really interested in seeing something like the genre of big tough guy goes through and smashes things with his fists, like Reacher.
I was
But
just
like,
gonna say Reacher.
how do yeah, like how do you run a role playing game that's like a solo role playing game? Because that you really, like, I don't really think that anybody would want to play Neely if they could play Reacher on that show. So like, do you play it as like as a two-person role-playing game? I've seen some really cool role-playing games out there that have where everybody plays characters and the game master is the main character, and so everybody is the forces working around them, and something like that would be really cool for a Reacher type game. Whereas everybody's just trying to throw obstacles at the main character. So yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun.
I was just laughing. I was just like, just RP would just fucking make up a rule set for Cheers.
Yeah, see, like something like that would like, I feel like you could do that with a Fiasco kind of game, but except I don't want it to necessarily end in Fiasco. Like if there was some sort of mod for Fiasco that then made it so that at the end of the game everything turned out fine and everybody went back to normal, which is, you know, the premise of any sitcom. Yeah, so like, yeah, like a sitcom role-playing game would be really cool, because you could go through and like, I wonder if you could do that with just like throwing out like random things from like different tables that you roll on, like, oh, today my brother-in-law shows up and he's marrying an octopus, you know, and then you play out that scenario. So yes, a sitcom role-playing game would be really a lot of fun. There was a role-playing game back in like the 80s called Toon, where you all played as cartoon characters. And everybody like operated on the rules of cartoons, where you could pull things from behind your back, like mallets and stuff like that. That was a lot of fun.
See, what was it? See, I have a specific on this in the same genre of like franchises you'd like to see as role playing games. I have a specific one in my head. Is there any role playing game based on a franchise that you're just like, fucking why?
Yeah, what was it? There was one that was announced like not too long ago. it wasn't Dexter, but it was like Dexter. And I was like, that doesn't what was it was based on a TV show and like an HBO or Showtime type TV show. And I can't remember what it was, but it didn't make any sense to me. But also like I think that there's a lot of things that don't feel like they could be role-playing games that that actually make really good role-playing games. Like there's another one by Magpie that's also powered by the Apocalypse, that where you play as a telenovela. Um, Pasión de las Pasiones, I think it's called. And so I've actually got they came out with these I think they call them like dustbin versions that are basically like cheap versions where they haven't really done a ton of playtesting on them, don't have a ton of art. And that and the Ward, I've got those. I've got a lot of weird role playing games. Yeah, I can't think of any others that are like one oh like I was actually surprised back in the day, the Smallville role playing game, that it uses the Cortex system, which I had been this is back like early 2000s that it had come out. And I had been playing the Cortex system using Serenity. And I was like, so I knew the rules, and then they were like, yeah, we're using the we're going to be doing Smallville. And then I picked it up, and there's no like superpowers don't really matter, and your stats are all your connections to other characters. And I was like, oh, this is a like a teen drama show, the role-playing game. It's just has like the skin of Smallville over it, and it's actually a really, really good role-playing game. Like I've made the stats using Bubblegum Shoe for Veronica Mars, but I would probably actually use the Supernatural rule set for Veronica Mars if I was going to be doing that. So that type of thing is I like when you have a game that you're like, I don't know that necessarily needs to be a role-playing game or makes sense with that genre, and then it turns out that it fits really, really well.
Yeah, was it a few years back? I ran across a PDF of Farscape, the role-playing game, and I'm just like, I'm reading through it. I'm like, this doesn't feel like a role-playing game at all.
Yeah,
like this just feels like an encyclopedia of random Farscape facts.
Yeah,
and then hey, roll some dice.
That annoys me. There was a big, huge push in the early 90s for when you came out with a role-playing game that was based on like a TV show, you would list in the book like a description of each episode, and the only thing I could think is that we didn't have Wikipedia at the time. Because it was like, why I don't need to know like in this episode where this person got turned into a frog. And so a lot of those games at the time felt very much like you were just reading an encyclopedia about the
it's just fun facts about this show you like. And I'm like, sweet, just put that out. I'll buy that.
Yeah.
Was there anything specific you wanted to talk about, converse about, share?
Yeah, so you've been doing this, like the etching and stuff for a long time. How did you end up getting into that?
Oh, for me, I was actually apprenticed when I was 15. Yeah. 14, 15, somewhere around there. With a woman that my father knew that did stained glass, like big church window, cathedral-y stained glass. And it was like, I need somewhere to put this. I need somewhere to put this kid.
Yeah.
Who keeps coming to me with life problems and shit, and I don't want to deal with them. So I got sent to her. And I won't say I'm not good at stained glass. it didn't click with me.
Yeah.
And so she was like, all right, let's try this. And she stuck me in front of a sandblaster with some, and I got taught old school style. It was masking tape on glass, Sharpie, draw what you want to draw, and then you cut it out with a box knife and run it through a sandblaster. And I was like, I love like iconography.
Yeah.
Huge fan of iconography. I love stuff like that. And so I'm like, this is my jam. I love this. And I just kind of, messed around with it for a few years. Once I got out of high school, I slowly put together the stuff that I would need. And I just kind of did it on the side for fun. I'd make gifts for people. I'd make stuff, just projects and stuff like that. And it wasn't until, I think for 10 years now, maybe over 10 years, maybe 12, like I've been doing it and selling my work.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just a thing that I got apprenticed as a ADHD kid that was just bugging the shit out of his parents.
Yeah.
And I needed to be babysat by somebody, and it just kind of I got lucky, and it just kind of stuck with me.
That's awesome.
And it's funny because years later, because now I am working with stained glass in just like a different capacity. Like I etch it and I make jewelry out of it.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things of like the making etched jewelry and whatnot. That was a thing that just kind of like happened. Like I broke a piece of glass one day, and I had picked up a shard, and I was like, this looks like one of those shark tooth necklaces. That'd be cool. I'm like, I wonder if I can make, like, shape it. And somebody had given me an old stained glass grinder. Went out and dusted it off and started messing with that. And then now I've made a couple 2,000 pieces.
Nice.
Learned how to make my own sea glass. Different ways of making my own sea glass. Etching the sea glass, embossing the sea, like a faux embossing, like putting the vinyl for the etching on a piece of sea glass. And then etching around it so that part is raised, so the design is raised instead of etched in.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, I wonder what this does. I wonder what that does. Now I've got like, I do community cleanup now, and just kind of walk around wherever I'm at, and I pick up any garbage and throw it away. Any glass I find, I bring it home, and I've got just buckets. And when I need new glass, I just smash a couple pieces. Smash a couple of pieces up and work with the cool shapes that it makes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, it's been one of those things, that and like off and on again, music. Like I'm very eclectic in the things that I do.
Yeah, I'm always constantly picking up different hobbies. Like I had, I taught myself guitar back in high school. Just chords and strumming, because I'm left-handed and I didn't like have a left-handed guitar, and so like the best I can do is strum. And then dropped off for years, and then only probably, and I'd tried to start a band. Like we had gone and like played at like some open mics and stuff like that. Because I had, before I learned how to play guitar, I had started a band and I just wrote the lyrics, and then I was the lead singer, and then when I left the band, I was like, I should probably learn how to play an instrument, because like I had played piano as a kid and stuff, but well enough that I know all the chords on a piano, so I can take guitar chords and I can like hammer them out on a piano. And so I self-taught myself how to play guitar, and then only probably about 5 or 6 years ago ended up picking up guitar again and starting to do it. And it's still only strumming, and I mostly am just going on to like guitartabs.com and looking up different tabs and playing those. I haven't written any songs since college, but yeah, so and then I just recently took up, I got a bow and arrow set for my birthday, and I've shot a bow here and there in the past, but I was like, I really want to learn how to like do it more consistently. So there's that, and then I'm just constantly finding new random hobbies to pick up.
the bane of my existence. Do I really need another hobby that
Yeah.
will that I like? And then constantly of like, okay, so I'm getting this hobby. I'm not gonna fucking monetize it. We're not monetizing this.
Yeah.
Because I'm never monetizing stuff for me isn't about like, ooh, I can make money doing this. I'm like, it's always, ooh, if I make money, I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's very much like I want to do this more,
Hmm.
but I have to eat. So if I
Yeah.
can find a way to eat because of this,
Yeah. Yeah, like I paint miniatures, and so I've taken up painting miniatures for friends and stuff like that, and that ends up basically just funding me being able to purchase more Warhammer.
mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh well, if
Woof.
if I paint up another couple of units, then I can get some more Warhammer, and I've got like 6 different 40K armies and 4 different fantasy armies, and a Soviet Flames of War army, and I've kind of got a little bit of everything with that as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I was big into Warhammer well, whenever I had people around me
Hmm.
that
Yeah,
played Warhammer. What I got like I bought the big box when it was when it was Space Marines and Dark Eldar when they were still called just Dark Eldar.
that would have been third edition was that rule book. Yeah,
Yeah, and so
that's what I started with.
yeah that's the two armies I got up in my closet that I've had for fucking ever.
Yeah, it's like 20 years. Yeah, me and my friend, because I'm not a big fan of current 40K, like the current editions, they're not great. And so me and my friend have actually started playing third edition again. And so
Mm,
we're collecting the books, and I've been playing my orcs, but I'm buying current modern orcs because I like the look of the models. But then, and I'm putting them on the bigger bases that they're supposed to be on for the current edition, and then playing them old edition with their smaller bases and stuff, because we're just like, nobody's telling us not to, because nobody plays that rule system anymore. So it's been a lot of fun to go back to old
mm.
40K and play that.
I had a roommate who introduced me to it
Yeah.
just out of high school. And I haven't had the money necessary to invest in it a lot,
Hmm.
but I've always kept up with it as much as I could, like lore and what's going on and
Yeah.
this, that, and the other. And um, I think that's one of the only war games I've ever played.
Hmm.
So I had friends that played a lot of what was the hexagonal mech one?
Oh, BattleTech. Yeah.
Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, I've got a bunch of armies for BattleTech, but that's easy to say when like an army is 4 miniatures. So
Mm.
I've got quite a few for that. There's actually a tournament coming up in May that I'm thinking about going to, just because it'd be fun to spend the weekend throwing around dice, and it's here in town, so it's not, I can just drive down each day. I don't even have to get a hotel room or anything. So I
Nice.
actually got like a pile of mechs right in front of me right now, because I'm trying to figure out which ones I want to take if I want to go along at all. So um yeah, BattleTech's a nice one because it requires so little. Like, I tell my friends, like, if you want to get into a war game cheap, if you have $100, you have got more than enough for you to play BattleTech for a long time. Um, and then twice now I've tried to play Star Wars Legion. Like, I've built twice now full armies for Legion, painted them and everything, and then sold them off. Because like when it first came out, I built up a whole army, and then I was going to go off to Korea for 9 months, so I was like, I could use a little bit of money before I leave, so I'll just sell it off. And then only like 2 years ago, I was like, I want to get back into it, and I built 2 armies for it, and then I was like, I don't think I'm going to play this, and I ended up selling it off again.
What was there was two that I always wanted the Star Wars Star Trek X-wing, and what was
Yeah,
the Star Trek one?
Attack Wing was
Attack
there.
Wing, yeah.
Yeah.
I always wanted to get it. There was a time there when God, I forget the name of the rule system. There was a rule system for space fighter combat.
Was the like flight path. Was that what they called it?
something like that. And it's just like I got into just like making hodgepodge minis
Hmm.
out of just like crap in my garage. I think I
Yeah.
still have some left. Like I made a squadron. I made bases of
Mhm.
squadrons of they basically looked like BSG Vipers,
Yeah.
but they were like the ends of toothpicks
Oh, nice. Yeah.
that I had just put fins on and painted up and then put a little wire going down into like a water bottle cap, and I had like 3 per base.
Yeah.
And like I never got to play, but I was so invested in just
Have you
making like
seen?
kit bash ships out of like bolts and screws from my shop.
Yeah. Have you seen um clothespin spaceships?
No.
Okay, let me see if I've got it here because
Hey, we're getting a raid. What's up, Painting Pirate?
hey, nice.
How goes it? Welcome on in. Let me get you a shout out. Oh,
Yeah, I'm not seeing it here, but basically what you do is you take clothespins and the wood clothespins and you separate them and you glue it all together and you can make all kinds of crazy ships, and especially when you pick up random uh like random sized
mm-hmm.
clothespins, then you just glue them together and you can create like really wild ships. I saw it with Billion Suns, which is a war game. People were starting to do it for that, and like it's really really amazing all the different ways you can assemble like clothespins into like very very different looking ships, and then you just like spray paint them and
Mm-hmm.
you've got ships ready to go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was obsessed for a good 2 months with just building an entire faction fleets of factions of kit bashed spacecraft of different
Mhm.
sizes made out of just like the snap buckles you usually see on like backpacks and whatnot, the webbing buckles,
Mhm.
with just stuff glued to it,
Yeah.
screwed into it, just capital ships, snub nose fighters, escorts, frigates, and I
Yeah.
this is important. This means something.
That's awesome. So yeah, I'll find some pictures and send them over to you because I basically just went to the dollar store and picked up a bunch of clothespins and glued them together. But
Nice.
yeah.
For anybody just coming in, so we got the links dropped. We've been talking about the current running Kickstarter, Song of the River Prince.
It's right here.
Trying to get it backed.
Yeah.
I'll drop the direct link in chat. It is running till the 15th, you said?
Yep.
And listen, like Bon Jovi said, we're halfway there.
Yeah.
Well, a little under halfway there, but
A
close
little
enough.
under halfway there.
Close
But
enough. I can math.
I think I think we can get there. I think it's just going to require a push at the end. I've gotten to get on to a couple of different live streams, including this one, and then I've the problem is I'm afraid that I'm like gotten to the point where I'm just annoying people on my blue sky because like all I'm talking about, and I'm like,
Welcome to my entire existence.
I know, yeah, like I hate being all pushy and stuff, but
hmm It's
like,
it's hard living in that space of having like advertising is for like corpse it's just background noise for us. We're so used to it.
yeah,
But us having to advertise ourselves, we feel like we're just bugging the shit out of everybody and being needy and this that and the other, but it's just like we don't have a team of professionals out there marketing this stuff for us. We
yeah,
don't we don't have the money to run adverts on YouTube,
hmm
and honestly, I'm trying to apply this more to myself when I feel like I'm being annoying. I appreciate a person talking about their passion project. It is far less annoying than like the newest O'Reilly Auto Parts commercial that just
yeah,
like just pisses me off.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
that's like this one of those things that's I have to say it's like gig economy and being an indie at whatever you're doing. It's the hardest part.
Yeah. And like part of my concern was like when we, because like I hit my previous Kickstarters hit the goals like immediately. Like I think my Black Winter was within like 7 hours. And so I was like pretty confident. I'm like, sweet, like I got all these stretch goals lined up, like we're gonna coast right through this. And then like after day one, we like hadn't hit 1,000, and I was like, oh, this is frustrating.
Mm-hmm. When I
um
when I do runs, I used to do like pre-sale runs of like, here's my design, here's my idea, da da da
mhm,
da da, and like, blam, you
mhm,
know, they would get like I would get 37 orders,
mhm,
and I would be able to like, all right, I said I was gonna do 110 of them. I've got orders for 110 of them. I'm gonna buy the glass, get it, da da da. Over the years, as the world around us has become what it is, like I start and delete so many of those runs because after 2 weeks to a month, I get no traction,
yeah.
and it's that tendency to immediately look inward
Mhm,
and be like, oh, it's your fault because you suck and you're annoying.
yeah.
Instead of going like, no, the world's actively on fire,
Yeah.
and everybody's in survival mode.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, like, because I had all these people who were like, we love this. This is great. I had a bunch of playtesters who all played the game. They're like, we love this. And then I was like, oh, maybe if 20 people tell you that they love your game, maybe that means there's only 20 people who love your game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been tricky to try to like get over that hump, and be like, no, like this game is worth like people seeing. And if for no other reason, then like I'm really really proud of like the beauty of a lot of the work that I've done. Like I think I just wrote some stuff just the other day about like the fake courts and stuff. I'm like, this is like some of the best writing I've ever done. And one of the problems is that with the way the games industry works is that if I just put this out on like drive through RPG, I'd maybe sell like 3 or 4 copies. And so like you kind of have to do Kickstarter to get enough eyes on it and get people backing it, because like I'm like, great, I got more than 60 people who are all backing it, who if I just put it out on drive through RPG, they wouldn't be there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like the unfortunate side of things, because like I could just fill the book with just a ton of stock art, but I want to get like some original pieces in there as well. And like David Oakham, who does the paper minis, I'm gonna be buying some images of like that he uses for paper miniatures, but of actual figures that I can then actually put into the book and stuff like that. So like for things like that, you got to have some sort of funding to start off with. So
Mm-hmm. Well, it's one of those things too. It's just like it's Kickstarters for like especially like TTRPG stuff, um, is like the hardest, but also the best because it's at its core collaborative.
mm-hmm.
People get to feel like they helped bring something to life.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things of like, yeah, you could just release it and but there's no huzzah, there's no
Mm-hmm.
triumph, there's no 3 acts. Like a Kickstarter really does have like that 3 act,
Yeah.
you know and it's sometimes it's a sad ending, sometimes it's a like down to the wire
Mm-hmm.
ending, and it's just people love that shit.
Yeah.
And that's like, as a content creator, you also have to be, you know, uh, able to do that old song and dance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just exhausted and you
Yeah.
don't want to, you like, you want to be genuinely you all the time, but like there are days that you just gotta, like, I hate to say it, just kind of mask up and clock in,
Yeah.
and it's exhausting. But
Yeah.
like you're here because you've got a passion for a thing, and sometimes it feels like work, and sometimes it's just joy and elation.
Yeah. And like the last couple of days where I've been writing up this stuff about the fake hordes, it's like been like pure joy, and then turning and looking at the Kickstarter and being like, that line's not going up.
Mm-hmm. Didn't you just
And
see
then
the
it's
thing I
really,
just wrote?
yeah. And then it's really then frustrating when I like look at some other Kickstarter that's like, there was a Kickstarter I ended up backing that just got funded. They didn't put out a single update the entire Kickstarter, and it ended up funding it like 400-500% what they were asking for, and what they were asking for was way more than what I'm asking for. And I'm like, how do they do that? Because like it was also their first Kickstarter. It just was a cool concept, and everybody clamored to it, and I was like, damn.
It's that perfect storm sometime of like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
right
exactly.
post, the right time, the right eyes got on it.
Yeah,
The algorithm was favorable that day.
yeah. And I was planning on starting this on at the beginning of April, and then Kobold Press announced that they were going to be making a game called Riverbank that was going to go on. That was going to start like the day before my Kickstarter was planning. I was
Oh
planning on
no.
making it go live, and I was like, "Oh no!" And they didn't provide any information, and I was like, "What am I going to do with this?" Like everybody's going to think that I like am stealing from them, like the idea, and then like just before my Kickstarter was gonna, I was like, okay, I'll move it back 2 weeks so that at least I've started before them. And then just before my Kickstarter launched, they showed like what the game is about, and it's basically Wind in the Willows, the role playing game. I'm like, okay, cool. Like my game is not that. Like you're not playing as animals. Like it's not your goal is not to sit around and have tea time. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's explicitly what that game is about. I was like, cool. They're very different games. I'm not like worried about that. And so I was like, okay, good, because I was so worried that I actually like got sniped by Cold Press.
Well, it's just like, and for all of the like this might or maybe this that happens in the whole, you know, bringing your wares to market
Hmm.
process, there's like 10,000 things that come out of the woodwork that you didn't expect to happen.
Hmm.
Weird problems, but also like cool boosts that you never saw come. Like, oh, I didn't expect that to happen.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like I said, I think that's why people like Kickstarter so much, because like it's participating in the story.
yeah.
And like you see people in chats when somebody like is talking about a system that they're doing, there everybody's in the chat like, I backed that Kickstarter.
Hmm.
It's something that they get to hold on to
Yeah,
and feel proud of, that they got to help bring a thing to life.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I've backed the back there, this whole shelf is all Marvel United, the miniatures
Mm-hmm.
that was Cool Mini or not, and getting to like watch that over multiple campaigns and building up, and the hype, and is always like super super exciting.
Yeah, was it when they? Because I had the original Stargate RPG,
Yeah.
and then when they announced the new one, that was the one for me that I was like, I am backing this fucking Kickstarter.
Hmm.
Like this is just feels like the culmination of like everything that's like my jam.
Yeah.
And it's still one of those things of just like I'm just very like I you got the stretch. I'm like, oh, there's patches, there's unit patches.
Yeah.
You better like I'm yelling at friends like you better put $5 on this so we hit a stretch
Yeah.
goal. I want those patches.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a friend who anytime I like some Kickstarter comes out that I want to like go all in on, I just turn to him and go, what do you need painted? And then he gives me a bunch of stuff to paint, and he's like, I'm gonna front load you the money so you can back this Kickstarter. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, oh, to be a billionaire. Just
Yeah.
wake up every day and turn on Kickstarter and GoFundMe and just
Yeah. They say you can't, like, money doesn't buy happiness, but I've never seen a sad person on a jet ski.
right. Oh, see, as we're coming up on 2 hours.
Yeah.
How do you feel about? Is there anything else you want to chat about, bring up, poke at, promo?
Not that I can think of. I'm really, really pleased with Song of the River Prince, and I'd really, really like to see it funded, because, like, I think if I had to go and I could definitely go and restart the Kickstarter and just set like a lower goal without having the original art on the cover, and that may be what ends up happening if it doesn't end up funding. But like, the good thing is, because I have it written, all it needs is for me to get artwork put into it. And so, like, to have like a full role-playing game of my own out there would be really, really cool, rather than making stuff for other people's game systems, you know? And I think it was like 2020, like very beginning of 2020, like January, I had tweeted out, this year I'm going to be in the room where it happens. And then COVID hit. And so I was like, all right, well, maybe next year. And then I was like, and then January 2021, I'm like, this is the year, like, I'm going to be part of the industry. Like, it's going to happen. And then we ended up with like a major family crisis at home that ended up shutting things down. I was like, okay. Next, and each year there's been another massive like roadblock that is like hit me hard. And like, I feel like my bosses are like, is this guy like making, because I work remotely, like, is this guy has a crisis like every couple of months? I'm like, yeah, this is just my life.
God, I feel that one with every fiber of my bloody being.
Yeah. So I'm like, I feel like something like this would finally, like, it's not going to get me like massive critical acclaim and everybody's saying that it's the best thing ever, but like I think it's good enough that I could at least get an any nom that would get people looking at it, you know? So and then I've reached out to a few different people to try to get actual plays done, but I think I reached out to them too late. I think you really have to have like 6 months advance notice for people to play your games with actual plays and stuff. So, but I'd love to actually see people sitting down and playing my games, because like, I've got a 1-page role-playing game called Love by the Quarter Mile that is, your 3 stats are fast, furious, and family. And so it's meant to be super, super light, and I just put it out there like more as a joke, and then I got this notification that these guys were like playing it on a stream, and I was like, this is great. I had a Fiasco play set that was called Toil and Trouble, where it was Harry Potter with the serial numbers filed off, and I've since removed it from any of my shops, because I didn't want to have anything to do with J.K. Rowling, even if it was serial numbers filed off. And so, but like back, before all that happened, like, people were just started playing the Fiasco playset that I designed on. They were running it like on RPG Geek, like in the forums. I'm like, so it's super fun to see people like playing your stuff. You're like, and you see all these live streams of people like playing RPGs, and they're like crying in the last session as like everything builds up. I'm like, I want people to cry over this.
I know that feeling too, because just like seeing people on the timeline posting pictures and whatnot, and I'm just like, I made that necklace.
Yeah, yeah,
Neat.
yeah. I've got somewhere back here. I've got some of your tokens.
Mm,
I bought them at one point.
that's always a. I keep trying to get into local stores,
Hmm.
but I don't know if I could not be a huge dork
Yeah,
if I saw someone like walk by that was wearing like earrings that I had made. I don't think I
yeah,
could not be a huge dork. Like I don't think
yeah,
I would bug them, but I think I would like the rest of the
yeah,
way back to the car.
yeah. The local Ren Fair, they they have booths for like it's like $100 for like the whole weekend,
Mm.
and so I've been tempted to do that and then print off a bunch of my stuff on Lulu just to have it like there and be like, hey, nerds, come get your nerdy stuff.
Hmm. I've gotten to do one smaller con,
Mhm.
and it was amazing. It was so much fun. I'm
Yeah.
hoping at some point to be able to like start to squirrel money away to do like more local. Like we have a like 14 minutes away. There's a small con here
Mhm.
that's just like in the one room, auditorium phase.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that I'm hoping to start getting in on. And then like there's a really good art community here
Mhm.
that has a lot of craft fairs and like pop-up stuff that
Yeah.
I'm hoping at some point. Like I think that's internet was great
Mhm.
like for a long time, but like I feel like more and more like I'm going to have to get out into the real world if I'm going to survive at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I always had a dream of putting together like a crafters coalition
Mhm.
or like a creatives coalition of almost like a guild
Mhm.
to where people could just pay like their guild dues, and then when there was a fucking like a bigger con in your area, like if there was a number of you could like the guild would rent the booth space for like
Oh yeah.
$5,000,
Yeah.
and then you could have like your person that makes dice bags, the person that makes dice, the person that like has the the game zines, the person that does
Mhm.
the little nerdy baubles and whatnot, like all in the same like little strip mall of a booth, so
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
smaller content creators can get access to a larger con.
That would be really cool. Yeah.
It's one of those things that just like it's so fucking cost prohibitive
Yeah.
that like there's
Like
no
I've
way
looked
like
in,
I could do like a Gen Con.
yeah. Yeah, those like I went to Gen Con 2010 and that was only because I lived um in Chicago so I could drive down, and then I also got because blogs were so big at the time, you could get um a like press pass, and so I was like, oh sweet, then I'll just do that. um but like now, like I've looked multiple times at Gen Con and it's just so cost prohibitive to even go, much less like set up a booth.
Mm-hmm.
um like if I were to try to go and like take something like this along, then I would have to probably just hitch my ride onto somebody else's booth, because I'm like, even if I sold like the Black Winter and Curse and the novellas that I've written of Curse and um, Point Man Hacker Thief, which is my spy role playing game, and sold little like one sheets of Love by the Quarter Mile and everything, like that's still like there's no way that you're ever making back your
Yeah.
money on stuff like that.
No, it's wild.
Yeah.
I'm still every chance I get for something like PAX U and even a little bit on Gen Con, whenever they talk about start opening up for uh, panels,
Hmm.
I consistently submit like crafters panels.
Hmm.
One of these days, that's a huge goal of mine, is to get onto like a TTRPG crafters panel,
Yeah.
because that's what got me to go to PAX Unplugged. Like the first time I ever went was 2018, 2019, something like that. I want to say
Yeah.
2018. Because I had never just picked up and flown to the other side of the country before. I'd never flown. Well, the second time I'd flown to the other side of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And it was specifically because a lot of the creators and makers that I knew in the TTRPG space that I was mutuals and friends with were all on that panel.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's, I wanted to go to PAX U because it's cool, but also that was the straw that I was like, I'm going.
Yeah.
And so it's been consistently a goal of mine to be like, I want to be on a, selling your wares and being a crafter, maker, creator in the TTRPG space specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've for a long time I've wanted to like run my own con, but and like even just like renting out like space in the community college and stuff like that, like Dice Monkey Con or Mark Con or something. But with this upcoming sort of mini con that's all war games that's happening here in town, like I know the owner of the game shop who's running it, and I'm tempted to like talk to him about like, hey, next year when you do this, like, can we have some booths and also like have a role-playing game space and like actually turn it into like a full con and stuff, because like he's running like 6 different war games there in a like a really beautiful space. I'm like, this could be like a legit full game con, because Spokane hasn't had one in years.
I have for the longest time now had 2 dreams of starting cons. One, like Nerds in the Woods, to where you just rent out every space at the campsite.
I would love that. Yeah.
And then just like, board games, 12, 7, and 8 are doing board games.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And also because I'm a big motorcycle nerd, just doing like, doing a motorcycle nerd convention, like the first one be like a bunch of moto nerds meet up and ride to a convention.
Yeah.
And then if it grows, just have to be a bunch of moto nerds meet up, and then wherever we're riding to, we're the convention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like a Sturgis for nerds with less stabbings.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you could sort of have it be like an all nerd, like, you could have like show movies and panels and do gaming and everything. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Because like I'm constantly on the lookout for just like nerds who ride.
Yeah.
Because like I've never really had like a group of riding buddies.
Yeah.
And I would just love to just be like, hey, let's jump on the bikes and go down to the game store.
Yeah.
And or go down to the coffee shop we like and play some games.
Yeah.
Or like, there's a couple of cool game themed places over in Indiana. It's like, let's hop the border, and just do a day's ride over there. That's something it's been big in my brain for the longest time.
Yeah. I've had knocking around in my head for a long time that I would love to own a game store, because I've worked in so many, including one that was like brand new, and absolutely loved it. And having like gone and like the last one I worked at, it was a comic book shop, and they didn't really have much of a role-playing and board game section, and like I started working there and I built it up from scratch into like a pretty substantial section. And then once I left, like it's kind of disappointing again. And like I know this stuff, like I know what to order, I know what people are gonna be into. Like I was organizing events and stuff like that. Like I would really, really love to own my own game shop. And it's another one of those things, like if I end up, with $100,000 dropped in my lap, then like it's totally something I could do. But like I also know the realities of running a game shop and the costs and everything, and I'm like, it would be like with where I currently am, even if I took out some big old loan, like with a wife and kids and stuff, it's like and a mortgage, I'm like, I can't.
Mm-hmm. I've
I
always
I
thought
could.
that.
I can't risk it.
I've always thought that like because I've always had dreams of making like renting a space for art to where
Yeah.
I could do my work there, I could display and sell my work there, but also I could teach there because
Yeah.
that's a huge part of who I am and what I do is I'll teach anybody every
Yeah.
last bit of knowledge that I've gleaned over the years of doing the things that I do. And I would love
Mm.
to have like a dedicated space where I can like, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna teach you how to do different types of glass etching. I'm gonna teach you how to, make sea glass and this, that, and the other, the ins and the outs,
Mm.
and how to design things and like old school glass etching versus like what I do now. Cause like I started with masking tape and a box knife, and now
Mm.
I've got like in the age of like cutting machines,
Mm.
I've got a couple of those going, and everything is just what I've done is evolved over the years. They're like being able to teach like, oh, you want a glass etch on a budget? Sweet. Here's how you
Yeah.
do it, like super inexpensively.
Yeah.
What was I doing on the stream the other day? I was showing people how to make their own sea glass at home.
Mm.
I literally found a piece of glass broken on the ground and a couple of different textures of rock that I found right next to it. And I just sat here and, because all it is abrasion in time,
Mm.
and just sat here and just made a piece of sea glass. It was like anybody can do this
That's
at
awesome.
any time they want. So if
Yeah.
you ever find like a piece of glass and you're like, that's a neat shape for a piece of jewelry, you can sea glass. I'm going to give you like get some sandpaper on a rock and you can make it yourself.
Nice. That's awesome.
Way too many cool things that we want to do.
I know. Yeah.
That's why the universe nerfed us and didn't make any of us billionaires, because we would quickly be not billionaires anymore, and
I know. Yeah.
we'd be fine with it.
Yeah.
I would not regret getting my hands on and immediately dumping back into the economy $1 billion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh. Well, is there anything else we can do your outro? You can tell people where to find you.
Yeah. So you can find me. I am over on Blue Sky at, I just changed it so it matched my my itch.io profile. It's the Blue Sky thing at dicemonkey.itch.io. And I'm also over on dicemonkey.itch.io. I've got a bunch of stuff over there, a bunch of my different games. You probably already own some of my stuff because I've put my stuff into a bunch of different like charity bundles. So like a lot, I think basically everybody who's on itch.io owns Love by the Quarter Mile because it's like a cheap little like 99-cent one-page thing, so I always include it in these bundles and stuff. So you can also find me over at dicemonkey.net. That's where I try to post regularly, and then of course you can check out the Kickstarter. Yeah, I've got my link tree there. That covers pretty much everything. So yeah, I take over on Ko-fi, I do take miniature commissions. I've had a couple people here and there end up taking me up on that. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, anytime. It's knowing people for like 5-6 years in the online space, and you're just like,
Yeah,
why haven't we ever just sit down and hung out before?
I know. Yeah. Yeah, I know. Like I had been following you for like a long time before. I think we started following each other on TikTok, and I was like, "Hey, how's it going?"
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Cool, Nick's finally noticed me."
That's one thing I love is everybody's always so like hesitant to reach out because they're like, oh, they're gonna think I'm weird, and most of the time, like, if you're mutuals on any site, in any given site, they're also probably like, God, I should reach out to him and like talk and collab and do a thing, but I don't want to be weird.
Yeah, yeah.
So everybody's just sitting at home going, wow, I really would like to talk to this person, but I don't want to be weird. And like, all it takes is somebody to just be like, fuck it, I'm going to be weird.
Yeah. Do you want to be my friend? Can we be friends now?
Making friends in your 40s.
Yeah.
Ugh. But hey, it's been amazing to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been great to talk to you too.
Congrats on the road so far, and let's hope we can get it the rest of the way. Anybody in chat, if you want to copy that link and go skeet about it or Instagram about it or whatever you kids are doing these days.
Yeah, the more people share, if anybody like looks at the Kickstarter and thinks like I don't have enough info on something, like they want to know more about how certain parts of the game work or anything like that, let me know, because then I can adjust and make sure, because I think part of it may be that people just don't know enough about what the game is, but I feel like I've told everybody like in the Kickstarter what it is, but maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just let me know. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Fingers crossed I can get across that finish line in the next 12 days.
Hopefully.
But this ended up helping. We ended up getting up to let's see,
62.
I'll reload the page. Yeah, 62 backers. So yeah, and then
Cool.
of course then you end up hitting like random people dropping their pledges and stuff, and you're like, no, I hadn't had forward momentum in 5 days, and now I lost somebody. That's always frustrating, but I'm glad that I'm glad number continues to go up again. So
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
so all right.
had a great time talking to you. You're welcome back to chat about whatever, however, we can just sit and have coffee on stream.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Anytime.
That'd be fun.
Let's see who we can raid into. Who is Let's see, mini train domain is doing something. Creator dashboard. Let me see what they're doing. Mini train domain. Vampires, werewolves, and dinosaurs. Oh my. Doing some TTRPG stuff.
Sounds exciting.
Kids on bikes. Nice. God, that is my favorite genre.
Love kids on bikes.
So yep. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for sharing your work and telling us about your journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, chat, for coming and hanging out. And we are going to raid on out. I will talk to you later, friends.
All right. Bye. See ya.
But you also see that about 50 yards away, there's a cabin.
There we go. Now I'm back on here.
Is the audio on?